Are fairies real? I think that fairies are real. I don't think that they're anything like how we picture them or how we feel that they are or what we assume about them. Um, a lot of times when I sort of hear people, especially witchy people, talk about fairies, they're described in like certain ways, sort of like these laughing, fun, like small children, or childlike energies that sort of are a little bit mischievous and like to play in water or something. And I mean, that's all, that's all real. Like anyone's experiences that they have are usually real. But I think the idea that whenever we sort of interact with some kind of entity that exists like on another plane or at another vibration or whatever, uh, a piece of what we believe and how we think sort of like interacts with what they really are and kind of doesn't mold them to our expectations, but definitely makes us perceive them like a particular way that we think that they are. And and I don't think that that is true. Like I think there's a difference between real and true. Like if I am gonna say that like I am worthless and garbage and that I feel like a piece of shit, uh, that's not true. That feeling is real. Like I really feel that feeling, but it's not true. Like I'm not worthless. I have lots of things to give, and so do all of you. But so I think that that is sort of where discernment is really important. I feel like in every video I make, it's going to be about how discernment is really important. Um, it's really interesting. I don't know how to make my eyes like look. Is that? Oh, this must be where the yeah. I don't know how to make it do that. So whatever. But I think discernment is really important in any of these practices. And sort of like discernment can be a lot about like what figuring out what is real and like when you're having some kind of supernatural or spiritual experience, figuring out like what the difference is between what's happening on like this side of my experience and what's happening on this side of my experience and how those things intersect, and sort of taking all of my own perspectives and lenses that I view things through as seriously. Uh like this can be very easily translated or seen as like, you know, are you like experiencing an otherworldly experience or experiencing magic or spirituality in some way, or are you, as like society sees it, as like a crazy person, and like what are the intersections between that? And that's not what I'm talking about. Like I don't really believe in that dichotomy. And but it's more about like being able to like split the difference between what is happening in the inner spectrum and what is happening on the outer spectrum, and sort of not necessarily not letting those things mix, because letting those things mix can be a very beautiful thing, but about being intentional about it, about understanding where all of these experiences are coming from, and being able to sort of say like, okay, I'm gonna let this energy through to interact with mine. I'm gonna let my energy through to interact with this to create this like experience that I'm having, and being intentional about it. So back to fairies. I think that the idea, especially if fairies are like beings or like energy spirits that are sort of more connected with nature and with the world. I think the idea of us coming into contact with one and then them being joyful to meet us is, I mean, I guess since it's my channel, I can say that I think that's ridiculous. Like, if that's something that you hope for or that you experience, then like props to you. Like, that's cool. You can have any experience that you feel that you have, and that's fine. But like for my own path, I feel like the idea that like if I met a fairy, like I couldn't imagine that fairy would be too thrilled to meet me, because when it comes down to it is like I'm part of a machine that is like destroying their homes and like taking away their power and making them vulnerable. So like I can't imagine that they would be too happy to see me. I feel like, and this all has like intersections with like quote unquote real world stuff, in that like there is like this machine of like capitalism and systemic inequality and injustice that is like destroying the world and its people, except for like certain people who are mostly just like white people, straight people, people who don't face injustice of any kind. Which that's not like a blanket statement. If you are someone who feels like you face injustice, then that's all the proof that you need from me. No gatekeeping here. But just that like, there are forces in the world that hurt some and don't hurt others. And that's what that is. And so I feel like those forces that like kind of are eroding and destroying the world are also would be eroding and destroying the spirit world, because to some degree they are like disconnecting us from like parts of ourselves that if we were attached to, we wouldn't be like taking part of these systems. So I feel like if a fairy met like a human or like a living being that's on the material plane, not like living in the astral anywhere, I feel like if a fairy met one of us, there would be like maybe two like outcomes or like feelings that would be presented when like those two beings met. Like if I met a fairy, I feel like the fairy would either, one, be very distrustful of me, to like outright maybe hate me or sort of have negative feelings towards me because of the role that I play in the destruction of their home. Or two, they would recognize that the machine also hurts me, mostly due to my experience as a queer person. And because of that, they would try to like free me from the machine, or maybe just feel sorry for me or something. Probably those two experiences of like distrust and pity like would be mixed. Like it wouldn't just be like one or the other, because like just like people who like we are all very complicated, multifaceted beings. Beings from like other planes would probably also be multifaceted, and like I feel like a fairy would be like, oh, like I want to like kind of tugging on me to be like, oh, get out of it, but also at the same time being like, oh, can I really trust this person who's been like caught in the machine? And some people might think like, oh, like that's not how it works, like they're above human feelings or whatever. And it's not, I don't even think that those feelings are just human. Like they just are feelings. Like I know that me as like a queer person, like sometimes if I am surrounded by all straight people, I am afraid of them or I distrust them because of experiences that I've had in the past. That's just like something that I can't get around. And I don't like act on those things. Like I don't, sometimes I do, but I don't always. Sometimes I just like, that's just kind of a low level existence that I live in. And and it's because of like, you know, they, like people who don't deal with the same things that I do, like have a tendency to just kind of like go with the flow and like it's cool. And also like I don't have any experience with this and I can't speak to it, but like I would never blame like a person of color for not trusting like my intentions because I'm a white person. And like I've seen like firsthand white people be super shitty. And like in my life, because I was raised in a like culture like that is white supremacist and white privilege rules all and stuff like that, like I'm sure I've done stuff too, and like I've done some work to unpack that. So like I don't blame people for not trusting me. Like even other queer people who maybe don't read me as queer, for whatever the situation is. Like if they don't read me as having the same sort of like struggles as they do, and because of that, like I don't blame them if they don't trust me because they don't know me and I'm not entitled to their trust. That's just the deal. So back to fairies. They have no reason to trust us because we are living in a society that's destroying their homes. And you might say like, oh, but I've had an interaction with a fairy and it was like really good. But like speaking as someone who like also is like a material plane dweller who lives in a place where systems are hurting me. Sometimes people say stuff that hurts me and then they go like, oh, I'm sorry, like did that hurt your feelings? And I'm like, oh, it's fine, because I don't have the energy to deal with it. And from their perspective, in their experience, they're like, oh, good, that's great. So when we're interacting with otherworldly energies or beings or entities, if we meet them and they're like all good with working with us, like we should think about like, is that really them, or is that us projecting like our own mythology onto their existence and their identity, and we're seeing what we want to see. And like making up your own mythology is great. Like that's part of the game. Like that's what I do. That's wonderful. And there's no like true line into like what is creating your own mythology and what is projecting it onto, like that's sort of like a lifelong question in discernment and like figuring out like how to do all of this, like how to interact with these energies and stuff. But that's just sort of something to think about, is that like I guess that's just my bottom line on like fairies or really any other otherworldly astral entity or like spirit or anything that's not like, you know, like you or me, like on the material plane, is that when we interact with them, it's important to try and like let go of what we think they are and what we assume they are and what we assume we're entitled from them. Because I don't know, I feel like that might not go too well if trying to work with something and they don't really want to work with you, but you're like, your faith is so like overbearing and powerful that they can't not. I mean, I'm not sure that that's how cosmic relationships work, but it might be something to think about. So that's it. That's a feeling I have about fairies. This was a question that was asked to me over my Facebook. I'm kind of just going through and answering them so that I have like fodder for these videos and this content. If you have a question that you want to ask, you can either get in touch through, all my things. It's just rune magic everywhere. I do tarot readings. I have classes coming up in January that I'm sort of giving talks on different things. If I was a professional, I would have them in front of me, but I don't. So next video, maybe I will say the titles so that you'll be more interested. But in the meantime,